Welcome back, folks, to another edition of my WrestleRant video series where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watched in the WWE Network. Continuing on with the Night of Champions theme for this month of September, I'll be talking about the 2012 installment of Night of Champions in today's video. So, kicking off the show, we had the Intercontinental Championship up for grabs in a fatal four-way match with The Miz defending against Rey Mysterio, Cody Rhodes, and Sin Cara. Now, unlike past years, the IC title match on the show actually had some build-up behind it. Cody Rhodes was kind of in a on and off feud to Sin Cara. The Miz had just won the IC Championship only a month or two before this against Christian, and Rey Mysterio was just kind of thrown in there for the shits and giggles. But it was a very good contest. It was marked the first ever time that Rey Mysterio and Sin Cara had been involved in a matchup where the two were pitted against each other. So the brief interactions between those two were very cool, and it built that it served as a preview of what should have been an eventual one-on-one matchup between Rey Mysterio and Sin Cara, a matchup that we would unfortunately never get due to Sin Cara, failing and Rey Mysterio getting injured so many times. But they were a tag team at the time. They turned on each other in this matchup to an extent. But both Cody Rhodes and The Miz had very good showings as well. Very fun four-way to kick off the show. No real incentive to see anyone come out as IC champion. Like I said, it had a story behind it, but there was no major focus on the Intercontinental Championship for the most part. It was just a lot of these guys just trading victories more often than not. But nevertheless, in a very cool finish, Sin Cara had a second mask on him, and he pulled off his mask, and he had another mask underneath that, like Rey Mysterio style from 2009. So he tries to put it on Cody Rhodes. A little later on in the contest, he puts it on The Miz instead, and a blinded Miz with the mask on, who can't see anything, hits the skull-crushing finale, I believe on Cody Rhodes, who was about to hit Crossroads, and I think Sin Cara or Rey Mysterio hits it, I think, out of just instinct, is what the commentator said, and gets the 1-2-3, still your Intercontinental Champion. So a very fun four-way to kick off the show with The Miz retaining the IC title. Forgot to mention this before, but this was only days removed from when Jerry Lawler had that very shocking heart attack on the episode of Monday Night Raw in Montreal. So they were looking for a replacement for him on commentary for this show, and he was replaced by none other than the returning JBL. And it's absolutely amazing what a difference a year makes. And on this show, he was heel, but I just remember being so excited to see JBL back on commentary. And I know I wasn't the only one. I knew a lot of people that wanted to see him back in that role. He was very good when he's not being a cheerleader for the Authority, but it's absolutely amazing, though. Like I said before, a difference a year makes, because he was so great at that point in time. He saw knowledge of the product. He knew what he was talking about. He was a little shaky at times, but he was still good. A solid heel commentator that can still occasionally cheer for the faces when he wanted to. So it was a good role for him, and like I said, until the Authority came around, and he became the cheerleader for the Authority, and he's been terrible ever since, but even still, that kind of helped add to the show. Up next, we had the WWE Tag Team Championship set for grabs, with the then WWE Tag Team Champions Kofi Kingston and R-Truth defending against Team Hell No, what they had just been called, Daniel Bryan and Kane. Actually, I don't think they were called Team Hell No until after this matchup, unless I'm mistaken. I can't remember exactly, but nevertheless, Daniel Bryan and Kane had been involved in a feud with each other in the months going into this matchup, because of course they had that love triangle going on with CM Punk and AJ Lee a couple months earlier. They faced off at SummerSlam with Daniel Bryan won, setting up this tag team going in and out of champions. It was a very last minute decision. Initially, it was supposed to be the Primetime Players getting the tag team title shot on this show, but because of the WWE Universe voting Bryan and Kane to be a tag team, eventually being called Team Hell No, beating the Primetime Players in the go-home show before Night of Champions to earn that number one contender spot to the tag titles, they got the shot instead. And I was very happy about it. I remember weeks in advance, I was so enthralled with the idea of having Daniel Bryan and Kane form a tag team, because I had no desire to see them feud with each other since that had been done to death up to this point. So I was excited to see them, tag team and go after the tag team titles, especially since Kofi Kingston and R-Truth were so bland as tag team champions. Not as bad as Michael McGillicuddy and David Otunga, because Kingston and R-Truth actually defended their titles, but they had zero chemistry with one another. It felt like one of those pairings that WWE just did because they were both black, because they were both African American. They said, hey, they look alike, let's throw them together. I'm not saying that's what their mindset was going with that tag team, but it certainly felt like it. Since they really had no chemistry, they had no mic time, they had great matches, but I just really had no desire to see Kofi Kingston and R-Truth as tag team champions. So I was so happy when they won the belts here. It was a good match for what it was. Crowd didn't really care for anything that Kingston or R-Truth did. Team Hell No was initially supposed to be a heel tag team, but they were so over with the audience and won over the fans that they eventually became like a tweener face tag team that the crowd could really get behind as part of Team Hell No. So they were very much in the corner of Team Hell No in this contest, who would eventually emerge victorious after Daniel Bryan pushed Kane off the top rope, who landed on top of R-Truth or Kofi on the ground. Got the 1-2-3, new WWE Tag Team Champions, and of course this would kick off the storyline of, I'm the WWE Tag Team Champions. No, I'm the WWE Tag Team Champions, and that very entertaining final few months of 2012 with Team Hell No. So this kind of marked the formation, the official formation of Daniel Bryan and Kane as a tag team, and kicked off their 8-month reign as WWE Tag Team Champions. So up next, we had the United States Championship on the line with Antonio Cesaro defending against Zack Ryder. Now, no real contender had been named for the U.S. Championship going into the show, so people were wondering, is the U.S. Championship going to be defended at all? And since it is Night of Champions, every title must be defended, so of course they did find a contender in Zack Ryder, who won a pre-show Battle Royal. Another thing I was very excited about, I remember being very happy about seeing Zack Ryder winning that Battle Royal to become the new #1 contender to the U.S. Championships. That was very cool. But at this point, Zack Ryder was really nothing more than an enhancement talent. He was more over than he is right now. I'll give him that much. I was still a broski, still am, so what I was at this point in time. But even still, though, I mean, JBL made the note on commentary that Zack Ryder never got his rightful one-on-one rematch for the United States Championship after he lost it to Jack Swagger earlier that year in January of 2012. So in a way, this was kind of his rightful one-on-one rematch for the WWE United States Championship. So that was pretty cool. The match itself really wasn't much. It only went about 7 minutes long, it says here on Wikipedia. It didn't feel that long at all. But since it was a basic squash, no one really had any belief that Zack Ryder was going to come out victorious as the new U.S. champion. I mean, Cesaro, it was one of those cases that Cesaro had just won the belt. There was no real reason to take the title off of him so soon. But this was when he still had Oksana in his corner, who helped him win this contest. And I don't really know. I mean, it eventually worked out for the better, but I never really knew at the time why they broke up Cesaro and Oksana. I thought those two were a very good pairing. They had good chemistry together. She kind of served that role in being that very attractive valet that the opponents can get distracted by. Cesaro picks up the advantage, capitalizes, and picks up the victory. So I thought they had very good chemistry in that sense, but they would end up breaking up maybe a week or two after this matchup took place. That was a little weird in my opinion. But even still, a good match from Cesaro and Ryder, even though people didn't really have much reason to care about it since Zack Ryder had really fallen down the ladder over the course of that year in 2012. But nevertheless, a nice matchup from Cesaro and Zack Ryder. Up next, Randy Orton and Dolph Ziggler in the sole non-title match on the show. And it wasn't like The Miz versus Fandango from 2013 Night of Champions or Big Show versus CM Punk from 2010 Night of Champions. Both of those matches had a story behind them, but barely any at all. At least this matchup was a good running feud on both Raw and SmackDown leading in and out of Champions, in that Randy Orton had beaten Dolph Ziggler on an episode of SmackDown, I believe the August 31st edition. And then Ziggler would follow that up with a win over Randy Orton on the Labor Day edition on Monday Night Raw. So they were tied 1-1, leading to this matchup at Night of Champions. I had thought they were going to put the Money in the Bank briefcase on the line, which Dolph Ziggler had possession of at this point in time. That would not end up being the case. And some people, I mean, it's really hit or miss. It's really, a territory where people either love the idea or hate the idea. I'm of that category of people that loves the idea of seeing the Money in the Bank briefcase defended. I have no problem with it whatsoever. I know a lot of people make the argument that whoever won it shouldn't be forced to defend it since they, had worked so hard to get it in the first place in the ladder match. It'd be asinine to put it on the line. I understand that, but I'm still of the category of people that, would like to see it defended every once in a while, especially if you were to beat the Money in the Bank holder. I think that gives you a right to challenge for that contract, but that's just my opinion anyway. But what I do know, though, is that Orton and Ziggler had a great match on this show. They've always had awesome chemistry over the course of the last few years, and this was no exception. Dolph Ziggler really had no chance of coming out victorious here, so I was not all that disappointed when he ended up losing. Since he had beaten Orton at least once before, they were still trying to protect Randy Orton at this point in time. But he looked great in defeat. That's the most important thing. He would look very good in the next couple of months in his feud with John Cena and, beating him in the main event of TLC, which I'll eventually review at some point. But, he had a very good final few months of 2012 Dolph Ziggler, even if he won or lost. And this was a perfect example of that in a match that he looked great in defeat that he didn't necessarily have to win. So a great showing from both guys here. Few notes about it. I know Randy Orton at one point in the contest would flip off the audience. I think when he was going for the RKO, when he turns over to do his taunt, I know he had flipped up the middle finger at some point, flipped the bird to someone in the audience, which was hilarious. I don't know if you can catch it on the network or not. I completely forgot about it until right now, but I know that it happened. I remember seeing a picture of it shortly after I watched the show for the first time when it aired live. And also the finish was great too. Dolph Ziggler, I don't know what he was going for, but I know he bounced off the ropes and got launched into the air by Randy Orton and got hit with an RKO out of nowhere. It was a great finish, and these two always come up with new ways to make their matches interesting and exciting, and this was definitely an exception, or definitely not an exception to that rule, as Orton and Ziggler have always worked well together, and this was a perfect example of that. So up next, we had the Divas Championship on the line with Layla defending against Eve Torres. Now, initially, it was supposed to be Caitlyn, and I still don't know to this day whether it was a botch or if it was planned, but I know on an episode of Raw in August of 2012, Caitlyn had won a number one contenders battle royal to become the number one contender to the Divas Championship. And I believe there was popular belief, and like I said, I don't know if this is confirmed or denied, maybe someone can back me up on this, that if Caitlyn was supposed to win that matchup, but it looked like Eve was going to, and because Caitlyn accidentally won, they put her in the title picture, and they went back to what their planned matchup was in the first place, with Caitlyn getting injured backstage and hurting her ankle, and then putting Eve in that spot instead. I think it ended up working out for the better, because had Eve just won that battle royal, and then it just would have been Layla and Eve in the title picture for the final few months of 2012. At least with the injury angle with Caitlyn, at least that propelled Caitlyn into the Divas Championship picture. She had been on the main roster for about 2 years at this point. She was still not all that great, but she was getting better. So I was glad to see her finally getting her push towards the Divas title. So that was pretty cool. So the way this all really worked out well in the end, since Caitlyn would eventually beat Eve for that championship in Eve's final WWE match in January of 2013. I think the first Raw of 2013? No, it wasn't the first Raw, I don't think. Maybe it was. I can't remember exactly, but I do know it was in Caitlyn's hometown. It was on the 20th anniversary show, which I don't think was in the first Raw of the year. It was in like the 20th or something, but anyway. Or the 13th? I have no freaking idea. But anyway, the main point here, the bottom line, is that they ended up working this out in the end and having Caitlyn eventually win that Divas Championship from Eve after a long, struggling battle against the Divas Champion. So, a good matchup here in terms of Eve versus Layla on the show. It was a decent matchup. Both Layla and Eve are very good workers. Very underrated in my opinion. They had a good match on the show. No one really cared. Eve was a great heel, if anything. I know a lot of people say that 2012 was AJ's year, and I would kind of say that for 2013, if anything. But in 2012 definitely was the year when, AJ definitely had a great year in 2012, but Eve, I think, is often overlooked in that she turned heel. She became the assistant to the Raw general manager, John Laurinaitis, the assistant to the SmackDown general manager, Teddy Long, at one point. Won the Divas Championship on the show, her third Divas title, the only diva in history to win 3 Divas Championships, and won in every single year. She won her first title in 2010, the second one in 2011, and the third one in 2012 on this show. So, a good matchup from Eve and Layla here. Like I said, Eve was still kind of playing that I'm innocent role, so people didn't really have any incentive to boo her until later on in her reign as Divas Champion. But it still was a good matchup for what it was. Eve coming out victorious as your new Divas Champion. Up next for the World Heavyweight Championship, what felt like the millionth matchup between Sheamus and Del Rio for that belt. One thing, and I know I'm definitely of the popular mindset, of popular opinion, in that these two, I never enjoyed their feud. They've always had very good chemistry in the ring, I'll give them that much. But it was one of those feuds where both guys were just so stale and uninteresting that it wasn't a feud that you can invest in at all. The whole bro kick thing, because the story going into this match in particular, I know they had been feuding for months upon months before this match, but the story going into this specific match was that the bro kick from Sheamus, one of his key finishing maneuvers, had been banned by the SmackDown general manager, then SmackDown GM, Booker T. But what really made it confusing was that the match, or right before the match, the move had been reinstated by Booker T. So basically everything going into this event in terms of the bro kick being banned, how Sheamus can be able to beat Del Rio without utilizing his finisher, it added an interesting twist to this matchup, but that had since been erased, that had since been gone, because the move was reinstated minutes before this match happened. So that was kind of ridiculous, but despite that, though, they still had a very good matchup. arguably their best match to date, at least in terms of this feud. And thankfully, the feud died a death after this and was over after this matchup concluded. But even still, of all their matches that they had at Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, and on this night in Night of Champions, I still to this day think that their best match of that feud was definitely at Night of Champions on this show. So a very good matchup, albeit unnecessary, because like I said before, the feud dragged on so much longer than it ever needed to. But still a very good matchup from Sheamus and Del Rio on the show. So we get to the main event, CM Punk and John Cena for the WWE Championship. Now the whole thing behind this matchup, and I was very glad because they kind of lacked in doing this and earlier on in the feud, but they finally started to acknowledge their past history from 2011, one of my favorite matches, /feuds, /storylines of all time, in the summer of Punk 2011. And CM Punk was coming off of his heel turn at this point in time and going into Night of Champions 2012. He had just been paired up with Paul Heyman, so a dream pairing there. It was never really explained why they initially paired up. I know they had the history, and JBL mentioned that on commentary. He said that it was on his DVD, on CM Punk's DVD. I don't even know if JBL has a DVD. But anyway, though, I don't even know if they ever really explained why Paul Heyman and Punk ended up pairing up, ended up forming that partnership on the main roster. But anyway, I digress. This was an excellent matchup. John Cena and CM Punk never have anything short of amazing matches. This was definitely one of them. It really all boils down to, and I see this question asked a lot, what was the best bout that Punk and Cena ever had? If I had to make a top three, it would definitely be between the Money in the Bank match from 2011, obviously. This matchup, I thought, is very underrated and definitely one of the best matches of 2012, despite the finish, and I'll get to that in a second. And their February 25th match of 2013 on Monday Night Raw was also an amazing matchup. The 2011 one had the best build-up. The 2013 one had the best wrestling. But this matchup comes in a solid third for great wrestling and a decent build-up as well. So, that being said, like I said, they got about, let me see here, let me just check. They got about 27 minutes of in-ring time. I was so glad they got about 30 minutes of that long in the ring in their matchup. They deserved that kind of time, and that was the same kind of time that I was hoping that Daniel Bryan and Punk would get, and they did, and I was hoping the same thing would happen for Punk and Cena. And remember, this is Punk's first main event on a pay-per-view as WWE Champion, because the whole thing going into this feud was that CM Punk was being overlooked by John Cena despite being the champion, that he wanted respect. That was the key word in this feud with Cena. But nevertheless, though, a great matchup. Like I said before, one of the best matches of 2012, in my opinion. It is often overlooked because of their past encounters from 2011 and 2013. But that being said, though, the match ends with John Cena, and both guys were kicking out of each other's finishers. The crowd was going crazy. The Boston crowd, John Cena's hometown, was not all in favor of John Cena winning the title, in which he did for a very brief moment. It's not in the history books, but he hit a back suplex off the top rope. Got the 1, 2, 3, and I just remember being so pissed when that bell rang, indicating that Cena had just won the championship, because it had ended CM Punk's WWE title reign just short of a year, and I was so angry at that. But then I was so enthralled, I was so happy when the referee took that championship belt away from John Cena and announced the match as a draw, because when Cena did that move, the shoulders of both individuals, both of Punk and John Cena, were on the mat at the same time. So it ended in a draw. CM Punk still your WWE champion. So like I said before, an amazing matchup. They really couldn't have done anything to keep that belt on CM Punk without John Cena getting beat clean. I know they had done that on Money in the Bank and SummerSlam, how clean, it's really up for debate since it was via distraction and, whatever happened at SummerSlam, which you can go back here and watch on the channel, my review of that show, cheap plug. But anyway, though, it was what else could they do? I mean, I don't like draws. It was kind of a dumb way to go off the show, but the bottom line was that CM Punk was still the WWE champion. That was what the essential part of this matchup was that Punk needed to keep that title going into his match with The Rock at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view the following year. And I had such strong belief that they would give the title to John Cena on the show. And it's not saying that, it's too soon for Punk to drop the belt. I said that in 2011 when he got beaten. I said that the year prior, and I said that in my review of the show, when Del Rio, was too soon for him to get beaten. He lost the championship on that show too. So I wasn't going to be surprised if history was going to repeat itself and John Cena would win his first title since that show on this show in Night of Champions exactly 1 year later. And thankfully, they resisted. They didn't give him the belt until WrestleMania 29, until that disaster of a matchup. Hopefully I don't have to review that show anytime soon, WrestleMania 29. But anyway, though, it's the best they could have possibly done. How clever and original the finish was, up for debate. Again, it's better than him getting counted out or disqualified, which we had seen a million times before with world champions and heel champions to be exact. But a draw was something, out of the ordinary, and it kept the belt on Punk. It kept the feud going between Punk and Cena for the next couple of months. So that's what the important thing was in my mind. So, with that being said, that's going to conclude my review of the 2012 Night of Champions pay-per-view. Overall, I thought this was a great show. Much better than the 2011 installment, that's for sure. Was it better than the 2010 installment? That's really up for debate as well. But nevertheless, so I thought this was a great show. I would definitely recommend you go out of your way to watch it. All the matches on the show are pretty solid for the most part. A lot of great booking decisions. I just remember being so excited with every finish of every match on this show because everyone went over that I wanted to go over, with Punk retaining, and Sheamus winning was a little disappointing, but it was expected given the fact that the challenger was Alberto Del Rio. The Miz retained, and the U.S. champion Cesaro retained. New tag team champions, new Divas champion. So, how many new champions did we get in the show? New tag champs, new Divas champs. So, it made the show newsworthy in that sense. A lot of awesome action. Felt like a new breath of fresh air, given that JBL was on commentary. CM Punk was a heel and the champion. Got a few new champions crowned. So, yeah, overall, I thought this was an awesome show. Definitely go out of your way to check it out. A lot of great action. You will definitely enjoy it. And it's definitely one of, in my opinion, the best Night of Champions pay-per-views there ever was. With the exception of 2010. 2010 and 2012, I thought were the best Night of Champions shows, in my opinion. So with that being said, thanks for watching, folks. Always appreciate it. If you want to make sure to show your support by liking, commenting, and subscribing, it's always appreciated. Stay tuned for the next couple of days until I post my review of the 2013 installment of Night of Champions. Until then, I'm Graham Jason Matthews, and I'll catch you guys next week.